The Medrash says that, well, the Gemara through the Gemara, well, based on the Chumash. The Chumash was that Yaakov Avinu, before he died, he wanted to reveal to his sons Ketzi Yamin, but the Nevuah was taken away from him. And we don't hear much more from Rashi or anybody else on that particular point. That's just the Metzius, that's what happened. But the Gemara Pesachim goes into more detail and explains that what really happened was the fact that Yaakov became concerned. From the Chumash, you don't pick up that Yaakov was concerned at all, but the Gemara says that Yaakov was concerned. And he questioned them. He said, is everything, beseder, everything musudar here? Have you done all the tikkunim that you have to have done because of the sale of Yosef, whatever happened since then? And they come back and they say, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Shem Echad, and Yaakov responds by saying, Baruch Shem Kavod Machu Sol Ve'ed. And that's the way the Gemara ends. The Gemara adds more than Rashi does, but the Gemara does not go beyond it to say why this dialogue took place in the first place, what it's supposed to mean, and whether or not that resolved anything at all in the end. Okay, so they said Shema, he came back and said Baruch Shem Kavod. It broke into Mariv at that point, I guess. What was the whole dialogue? What was the point of it? So the Zohar says that really it was an incomplete discussion, in as much as that finally said the Shema, which confirmed the fact that actually the Gemara explains to mean that just as God is one in your heart, God is one in our heart too. So that was obviously the issue. That's what Yaakov was questioning. That somehow the lack of nevuah, the loss of nevuah, was the fact that it was based on the fact that there was something missing in terms of the achdus of Hashem in them, because they sold Yosef, and that had to be rectified. And when Yaakov came back and said Baruch Shem Kavod Mochsam Ved, that it was his response to the Shema, and the Zohar says that it's nice what you. I'm just paraphrasing a little bit here. It's nice what you're saying, but it's not really the reality. Because if it was the reality, what you're saying is true. It has to be. But if it was really true within your own hearts, then basically the Nevuah would never have left. There's two reasons why the Nevuah could have left. Either because everything is beseder here, but it wasn't the time. I'm not ready to do this, to give over this information. But then becomes the question why Yaakov didn't know that in the first place. Or the second possibility, it was okay to give the information over, to reveal this information to people who are fitting. And they weren't fitting. Yaakov said, just like Abraham gave birth to Yishmael, just like Yaakov gave birth to Esav, maybe I've given birth to somebody who shouldn't be here right now, and things are not rectified, fixed up. The Gemara says it takes 3 generations to get rid of Zuhama. So Gemara in Shabbos, Avraham couldn't do it because it was the first generation, then Yitzchak was the second generation. Yaakov was the third generation. That was supposed to get rid of the indelible impurity that was imparted to mankind by the Nachash. The Gemara says the Jewish people, anyhow, by Har Sinai, got rid of it. Not by the Gentiles, but the Jewish people, when they said Nasav and Nishma, but the Egla Zahav brought it back somewhat. But that's the way the story stands in terms of the Gemara. But the Zohar says that just like the Shema was supposed to have 25 letters, so was Baruch Shem Kavod Malchuso Le'olam Ved supposed to have 25 letters, which we explained that probably that would be the Vav. Now, probably it should say Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Shem Echad U'Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus, because as far as the Zohar Kabbalah explains, that the Shema represents the upper Yichud in Shemaim amongst the Malach, amongst the angels, where there's no doubt whatsoever in terms of Hashem's Hashgacha Pratis, and Baruch Shem Kavod Malchus represents the Yichud in the world below which we live, right? Which we live, meaning that the everyday world, in which case it's more theoretical than it is reality. Meaning that. Meaning that the whole thing, like based that. Let's get my concentration back here again. That and that's why we whisper it. That's why we say it as a whisper, because it's more theoretical than it is reality. We talk about it. We say the Shema. We talk about trust in Hashem. We talk about the Yichud of Hashkosh Baruch Hu, and then go right out and do things that kind of like display just the opposite. We don't have enough Amunah. We act in ways that Hashkosh Baruch Hu is not completely in control. We ascribe power to things that don't really have power by getting angry at these things, not really realizing everything's Hashgacha Prati. So that's what Yaakov sensed, and we see in the Chumash, and then in Parashas V'yechi, and he was absolutely correct, because it says the brothers came to Yosef afraid about his potential desire for retribution, and Yosef responds by saying, "Am I in place of God? If 10 candles couldn't put out one candle, you guys couldn't get rid of me, because Hashem runs the world. How much more so I can't get rid of 10 of you?" Hashem runs the world, and that's the whole limit of history. So Yaakov left it hanging, meaning that nice try, but it wasn't exactly as you say, and therefore you're going to have to go through exile or whatever's coming up in history to rectify that lack of yichud in Hashem that's in your mind, the lack of consistency, because eventually we have to get to the level of Malachim on Yom Kippur, right? We say Baruch Shem Kavod Machzam out loud, because we get to the level, so to speak, the perspective at least of the Malachim, of the angels, right? So therefore we can say it out loud because then it becomes a Metzias for us on Yom Kippur. The angels have no taina anymore, so Baruch Shem Kavod Machzam. Yeah. And that's what has to happen. In the meantime, it's a work in progress. History's about fixing this. It all comes down to this, just to get that level where the yichud of Shemaim is the same as the yichud on earth, which is defined as Vayamahu Yishem Echad Shema Echad. Right? On that day, Kosh Baruch will be one. He's always one. Means one in our minds. Amalek, as Rashi points out at the end of Parashat Beshalach, comes to be mafrid between Yud-Kei and Vav-Kei, which on a very simple level means that it's all the things in life that make us look at reality in such a way as if Kosh Baruch Hu is not in control completely, as if other powers can do things, and that he's not involved in all aspects of everyday life. That's what Amalek does to us. Our job is to rectify it. Torah comes to fix that up. So the Zohar says that tikkun, that rectification, did not take place until the Mishkan was built. When the Mishkan was built, that fixed everything in the end. And that's why it says that the first pasuk of Vayikra, after it says Vayikra Shema Moshe, right, the last part of that pasuk is 25 letters, to make up for the 25 letters that Yaakov wanted to give to Baruch Shem Kavod Machzam Ved, but couldn't because of the lack of rectification. So the Mishkan represents the tikkun of what the brothers were supposed to achieve, but never achieved in the end.
25 letters of where?
The first verse of Vayikra, of Sefer Vayikra. Yeah. After the part says Vayikra Hashem al Moshe, right? You'll just count the letters after that. There'll be 25 letters.
To what? Another 25 letters, and that's what.
In that pasuk, so those 25 letters, which are being applied to the Mishkan, and are in place of the 25 letters that should have been by Baruch Shem Kavod Machzam Ved.
This is the pasuk that deals with building the Mishkan?
It deals with already in the Mishkan, but Kosh Baruch has already given the sivui about the karbanos already. We're talking about karbanos at this point in time. It's already going to that stage. But the point is the Mishkan was supposed to rectify all that. That's what the Mishkan represented. The Yichud. That's why if you look at this week's Parsha, it mentions that there'll be 50 male class, 50 female class, and they'll come together and join it, and the Mishkan will become echad, become one. Now, at the beginning of the Parashat, Kosh Baruch Hu says, Asuli Mishkan, right? V'shechanti b'sachem, right? That I build me a Mishkan that I can dwell amongst them. And the Meforshim explained that it's literal. Really, it was supposed to have been that Hashem would dwell within every single Jew. And the Mishkan itself, as the Tanchumim points out, was not supposed to be l'chachila. And we mentioned before, that's why in Parashas Naso at the end, where it's talking about the Chanukah HaMizbeach, where the 130 talents of silver to build the spoon and this thing, Mishkala, was an allusion to the 130 years of the Erev Rav, which Moshe Rabbeinu brought out, which caused the golden calf, which caused the need for the Mishkan and all that. The Beis HaMikdash was always meant to be. That always had to be. But the Mishkan itself, the traveling portable Beis HaMikdash, that wasn't supposed to be. What was supposed to happen instead was that Kosh Baruch Hu was going to dwell within every single Jew. And that was supposed to happen. It didn't happen because the Zahav, so as a result of that, it was transferred instead to the Mishkan. The Mishkan became the place where Kosh Baruch Hu was going to dwell because there was something lacking from Klal Yisrael. What exactly was that? Well, there's a fundamental problem. Without Achdus, you can't have the Shekhinah dwelling amongst Klal Yisrael because the Kosh Baruch Hu is one. So the Kosh Baruch Hu is going to dwell in Klal Yisrael. It means every one of us, so to speak, is a piece of that oneness. The only way it's possible is if we're all unified, and then the oneness of HaKadosh Baruch Hu can be within the oneness of us. But as long as there's going to be schism, there's going to be division in Klal Yisrael, by definition, it's a pagam to HaKadosh Baruch Hu's oneness, so to speak. So therefore, HaKadosh Baruch Hu transfer that oneness from Klal Yisrael to the Mishkan instead, where it can be unified in one particular building, and there was no division in that building itself.
So you're saying, if I understand, are you saying that the Haftarah, the separation that occurred between Yaakov and his children,
No, between Yosef and his brothers,
between
really.
Yosef and his brothers, but it was manifest in Yaakov's
Yeah.
not being able to give over his nevuah.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
That lack of unity, which never occurred, right?
Right.
Which was at the apex of the Jewish nation, which was the brothers. This was the Shvatim, right?
Right.
So in essence, has never occurred within the Jewish nation. It happened within a building.
I was following up to that last sentence.
You're saying the Mishkan.
Yeah.
Mishkan.
Mhm.
Mishkan. It's not happening in the people.
Right.
It's not part of us.
It did happen. It did happen temporarily. It did actually happen temporarily. We got to the level of Kisha Chabalevacha, and that's why we had to get the level of Kisha Chabalevacha by Har Sinai. Because Baruch Hu gave the Torah, and we said that, and then we lost it by the Egel Zahav. Right. So that's why the Mishkan became necessary. Had the Egel Zahav not taken place, then we would have remained unified as one people, Kisha Chabalevacha, like a single person, a single heart. We would have been the Mishkan. Klal Yisrael would have been that. What does the Mishkan represent in the end? Ultimately, it's just the unity of Hashem. Think about it for a second. What is the base of Mikdash? When we talk about it in terms of the activities, but what does it actually represent? What is it? Yeah, it's like it based the whole, and that's why everything about the Mishkan is all yichud. This will become one, joined together, because the whole point of the Mishkan is to bring the yichud of HaKadosh Baruch Hu from the upper worlds to the lower worlds. You're drawing it down, and eventually, b'yamahu Yeshem HaKadosh Baruch Hu will be one in this world. Meaning there'll be no distinctions in the minds of men about to what extent HaKadosh Baruch Hu is involved in everyday life and in this world. The light of Hashem will exude out from everything. In Techiyas HaMeisim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what are we after in the end? Okay.
That was superimposed upon us.
Yes.
That was
By Har Sinai?
Yeah.
Yes.
It was
The event caused it.
Exactly. The event caused it. So the fact is that we never makabeled within ourselves this sense of unity amongst.
And that's why we lost it. And that's why the Egel Zahav took place. It would never have happened. If the unity had been ours, if we'd been able to hold on to it, we'd built it ourselves, right? And that's why it took 50 days, because the whole point of 50, of Chamishim, is Nun Shari Bina. The whole point of Nun Shari Bina itself, the 50 gates of understanding, is for the sake of bringing about the actions of Hashem in this world. That's what we're saying the Shema. The whole point of the Shema is to remind us we're here to be Miyachad Yudke and Vavke. The war against Amalek in this world is he's trying to pull apart Yudke and Vavke, and we're always trying to be Miyachad them. That's what we say before putting on tells in Tefillin. The Shem Yichud Shkinte, right? The Yudke Vavke Shlim B'Shem Yisrael, right? We're doing this mitzvah for one reason and one reason only, not just this mitzvah, but every mitzvah. The point of the mitzvah is to act as a vehicle to unify Yudke with Vavke. What does that translate into everyday terms? That we act in a way that nobody could ever think for 1 second that Hashem is not involved in every aspect of life. Total Kiddush Hashem. That's the idea of Kiddush Hashem. Kiddush Hashem is an expression of the unity of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in everyday life.
But if the Shvatim were not able to do it, how are we going to be able to do it?
So first of all, the Shvatim were able to do it. Otherwise, they wouldn't be held responsible for it. But it turns out that it's not so much a function of capability. That, for example, you find in life very often that there are people of lesser ability who are able to accomplish things that people of greater ability can't accomplish. So people talk about muzzle, luck, things like that. But ultimately speaking, what is the distinguishing factor or feature in a person that often results in success, especially if you believe in Hashgacha Pratis and you believe Kosh Baruch Hu runs the world? It comes into Ratzon, right? They have different expressions. Ein davar omed b'tnei bitachon, but also ein davar omed b'tnei Ratzon. Right? There's none that stands in the way of Ratzon. Ratzon ultimately is what determines a person's success in this world. So, for example, that's why you have two types of Gilgulim. You have the Gilgul that you're actually you're born another time. Your soul comes back in a brand new body, a different lifetime, and you have an idea of Gilgulim, what's called Ibur, where an Neshama will come to you while you're still living. You're walking around, breathing like you normally do, but all of a sudden you have a Ratzon, right? And from the word muber, to impregnate, right? So you don't have to die to get a Gilgul. To get your Gilgul, your neshama, you have to basically die and come back another lifetime. But they get somebody else in the neshama inside of you to help you out. For example, Pinchas, after he killed Zimri and Cosby, Nadav and Avihu's neshama came into him, and that's how he was transformed into Eliyahu and Navi. Because Eliyahu we mentioned before, he didn't have parents. He wasn't born in this world of Eliyahu and Navi. There's no parents mentioned anywhere. And rather, he was the Pinchas metamorphosized into Eliyahu because he got these extra neshamas as an ibur because of the schus of being a zealot on behalf of Hashem. So every time a person wants to do a mitzvah that goes beyond his technical means, physically, or his neshama is not just the capability, but his ratzon's there, because Baruch Hu will inject a neshama into that person to give them extended capacity to be successful, and it will remain there as long as you maintain the level. As long as you maintain the level.
We saw that, we learned that together in Chaim Shmulevitz. It was called Micha
So that's therefore what the Mishkan is supposed to do. How does the Mishkan actually achieve that? Right, but that's what it's supposed to do. So where do you find, where did everything become undone in the story of Yosef and his brothers? Where did the Yichud really break apart? It was unraveling already, obviously, back at home. Right, but where does it really break apart? In the at the Mechira, which takes place in Shechem. Right? Shechem, as the Gemara says, is a makam muchan lepor yinat. Right? The Gemara says it's a piece of Eretz Israel. It's a makam muchan lepor yinat. It's a place that's set aside for punishment, as Rashi brings down in Parashas V'yishlach, that's where Dinah was violated, that's where Yosef was going to be sold, and that's where the Shvatim, later in Rechavim's time, will divide the nation into two parts, Yisrael and Yehuda in the end. It's a makam muchan lepor yinat. Rashi doesn't explain why it's a makam muchan lepor yinat, but that's what it is. The only other time you find this language used of muchan lepor yinat, set aside for punishments by Amalek, the Gemara refers to Amalek as being a ritzua bisha, like a bad belt, a punishing belt, because Baruch Hu uses Amalek in the sense to get the Klal Yisrael, plus he himself becomes fitting for punishment. But specifically, right, the Gemara says, why was Haman's name Memuchan? Why is he called Memuchan? Right, so the Gemara explains because he's Muchan lepor yinat. Same thing. Very strong kesher between Haman and Shechem. Doesn't know what the kesher is, but he's Muchan lepor yinat. That's what he says. So, what does that come down to? So if you look at the word Shechem, right? Shechem, possesses three letters, very simple spelling, Shin, Chuf, Mem, right? So the Shin and the Mem spell the word Shem itself, right? Except for one thing, there's a Chuf in between. Now this Chuf might not be significant, except for the fact that the Gemara in Shabbos says that if you can place a menorah, it's ideally close to the ground within 10 tefachim, but you can actually go up until 20 tefachim, the Gemara says. Why? Because Ein a shotabeh, the Gemara says. Sukkah also, same idea. And Erev too. Those are the three things. And Erev, Sukkah, by Sukkah it has to do with more with the cell. That the shade, you should be sitting in the shade, because if it's too high up, the shade hits the wall. But an Erev, it has to be recognizable, to be able to see where the Erev is, and right, the same idea, that your eye can't see that well. But what if you have a huge menorah? Fantastic huge menorah, which is huge, like one of these chabad things, you can see them about 60 feet away, basically. 20 amos is about 60 feet anyhow. But that's the height. Where does the 20 come from? Does it explain? But the Gemara says that's the limit of one's vision. Now the truth is, you can see a menorah even if your eyes are blurry. You can pretty much tell if you know what you're looking at. The menorah pretty high up. But that's what the Gemara says. What's interesting is the Gemara, the same Gemara, which is quoting, I think it's with Kahana. Rav Kahana B'Shem, or someone B'Shem Rav Kahana. There's a few different Gemaras, one in the row in Shabbos, different halachas with Chanukah. And after it mentions this thing about the menorah not being higher than Chav Amaz, it goes in the whole story of Yosef and his brothers. Actually, not the whole story. It goes in one little paragraph. That's where the Gemara shows up, where it's mentioned that Habor Rikvi Mumayim, right? The Gemara is quoting the Chumash, where it says that the pit was empty and there was no water inside. So the Gemara asks the obvious question: if the pit is empty, obviously it has no water inside. Why does it mention there was no water inside? So the Gemara answers by saying, "Ma'im einbo aval nechash mekravim yeshbo." Right, water there wasn't, but there were serpents, there were snakes and scorpions and all kinds of terrible things down this pit. And the Gemara goes right back to Hilchos Chanukah after that. It just injects. There's a little story about Yosef and his brothers, about the pit, the whole thing, which is the Mechira, that's the division, that's Shechem right over here, between the halachas of not placing a menorah higher than 20 amas, and then it goes into halachas about not counting, money by the menorah and that, but doesn't really what the only kasher seemingly, is the fact that the same rabbi who said this halacha, said this medrash, and this halacha is one long train of thought. Because the Gemara was a train of thought. The Gemara was meant to be memorized. So very often Chazal placing together specifically as memory devices. So even though on the surface of it would look like maybe there's no connection, the very fact the same rabbi said these things, that's one of the ways to remember different parts of Torah Shabbal Peh. Even though there might be other places that are more connected on a conceptual level. But we'd have to assume and believe that the connection is much greater than that. Especially if you look at the story about Yosef and his brothers. Why is the Gemara telling me there were no snakes and scorpions inside this pit? Who cares? What do I need to know this for, right? Yosef survived. So what's the information? Why does the Torah go out of its way to provide this information? Well, you notice later on, Rashi says, by the Arabs who come down they pass the brothers, and the brothers decide they're not going to kill Yosef. They'll sell him into slavery, and these Arabs are passing through, and they choose to sell him to these Arabs, and it turns out that they're selling besamim. So Rashi says, look how Hashem, how Hashem runs the world for the sake of tzaddikim. Normally, Arabim, right, they sell neft. Even back then, not just today, all through history. They have a certain affiliation, affinity for neft. And they're always selling neft, and neft smells terrible. If Yosef had gone down to Mitzrayim and this caravan full of this convoy of oil tankers, then he would have a rough time. I mean, phlegm when you throw that stuff. You stand by gas stations. It can't last too long. But so Hashem instead, he made a nace for Yosef, and he made it the dafka, good smelling stuff was in the same wagons that he was going down to Mitzrayim. Again, so what do we need to do? If he's a tzaddik, save his life. If he's not a tzaddik, so then don't let him go down the worst way possible. What's the Torah alluding to? What's the Torah telling us by telling us about these two things? So Rashi says, well, this is a nace. So likewise, the first thing is a nace too. So what do we need to know about these nisim for? Do we have any doubts about Yosef? We've read the story. We know the ending already. Even the first time you read the story, if you can remember that far back, did you ever have any doubts about Yosef at Tzaddik? That he was a good person, that Hashem was on hhis side? Certainly after you read the story, so what do I need to know about all these nisim and nifloah taking place for Yosef? What's the pshat behind the pshat over here? So the answer is because it should make you ask a question. And the question that you should be asking is, okay, so if all these miracles are taking place, how come the brothers don't notice it? Because the first thing the brothers should say to themselves is, there's no water in this pit, right? And Yosef comes back and says, there's terrible scorpions and snakes and all kinds of vermin down here. They're going to eat me in 2 seconds and sting me and bite me and kill me, and I'm finished, right? Yeah, well, you're doing pretty good for someone who's in danger. He's not dying. The first thing that the brothers should say, maybe we should prejudge him. Hashem, when was the last time Hashem performs a nace for a Rasha? Unless it's for the sake of a tzaddik, right? But if it's, for the Rasha himself, it doesn't happen. If Kodesh Baruch Hu is providing all these nisim, the brother should have said, Meis Hashem Haisa Zos, Hiniv is being named. This is a club like Klal Yisrael, right? This is directly from Kodesh Baruch Hu, this which is unusual, which stands out in our mind, catches our attention. The brother should have said, boy, it's his lucky day. All the time, that all the years we've ever met, they're always, selling neft. The one time Yosef is going down to Mitzrayim, he gets the wagon train full of good spelling stuff in the end. What a lucky guy he is. Well, that's kind of a nace. It's hashkacha praktis. It's not stam this happens. So maybe, just maybe, we've made a mistake about this person. Maybe we're missing something. Maybe there's something we should look at that we're not taking into account over here. We should reconsider the entire story. They don't even ask that question. They don't even notice what's going on inside this pit. They drop him down. I didn't hear any splashing. I didn't hear splashing. You hit the bottom yet? I was like, there's no water down there? Boy.
Tell him he's going down first class. What is this? Yeah,
because at the bottom of the pit there's no water. There must be, the pit can't be empty. There must be all kinds of terrible things down there that could be poisonous, and he's still surviving. That's a nace. So you could say, well, that's where the Gemara is connected. That's where the Gemara of the menorah comes before the story of Yosef, because Yosef is obviously 20 amas, plus it's dark inside the pit, right? 20 amas inside the well, that was that deep, and they couldn't see what was going on down there, but they could certainly hear. And Yosef, and the Medrash says that Yosef was screaming. Later on, we don't hear him screaming Parashas for Yishlach. It just happens boom, 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 right? But later on, when the brothers are feeling bad about the whole thing, They mentioned the fact, we heard him screaming. We should have had rachmanas. We didn't have rachmanas. So you can imagine, he was crying, and more than likely, he was yelling out, what about Abba? He's going to suffer so much because of this. He won't be able to tolerate my being sold. And he was crying out. Certainly, he must have said, "Get me out of this place. It's full of terrible things." What's going on down this pit in the first place, right? Just imagine there's Yosef down below talking to all these scorpions and snakes are all sitting around in a little semicircle, listening to him talk and say, "Well, first my brother sold me. They sold you. It's terrible. My brother would do a thing like that. Now they put me down this pit with all you poisonous things. And don't worry. We're not going to bite you. God told us not to bite you, not to sting you. They finally pull him up and he's in perfect shape. Well, as we said before, the Chof Amos is not like kind of an arbitrary number in as much as some people's eyesight is better than others. And certainly 20 Amos, 60 feet, with a big menorah. Just say you have to see the menorah. If you're going to place a menorah that high, that should be the criteria. You must be able to see the Ner Shechem and recognize them for what they are. You want to put it 60 feet in the air, it has to be a big menorah. You want to bring it close to the ground, it can be a small menorah in the end.
Is he lower than 20 Amos?
Sorry? We don't know. It doesn't say, but we're saying that maybe that's the connection. On one level, physically, maybe that's the connection. But it's a little shvach.
They didn't notice the nace.
They didn't notice the nace. But it's a little shvach to say that's the whole connection to Gemara. Unless chof represents something a little bit more fundamental, more profound, meaning that it's not a physical, obviously halacha is a physical distance. We go by as a halacha. But it's more of a conceptual reality. That rather, chof does not represent a physical blindness, it represents a spiritual blindness. An inability to be able to see the yuchad of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. The same way that people look at miracles. Some people say, "Wow, that's a miracle." People go, "That wasn't a miracle. That's just but not a miracle, right? I don't know what it is, but it's not. Are you a from Jew? I'm a from Jew. Do you believe God runs the world? I believe God runs the world, right? Do you believe that everything's Hashgacha Pratis? Everything's Hashgacha Pratis. Do you believe in miracles? Kind of. It's like Hashem runs the world. Right? Obviously, if something happens and it's miraculous, but the odds are 10 billion or 10 to the 20th power that maybe that carbon atom at one time in history it had to do this thing, it did do the thing, and that's why we're still here. 10 to the 28th, whatever, it's an impossible number doesn't even exist really. Basically, it's a possibility. But would you invest your money based upon that?
You just answered a question from with Yisro. On Yisro, it says that Yisro came after Kriyas Yamsuf and Melchus Amalek, right? And very interesting, the whole world experienced both, but only one person came
out, right?
So the fact that one person came doesn't mean that everyone didn't know about it. Everyone did know about it.
Exactly.
But the only one that it really
impacted
was Yisro. Is what you're saying.
Exactly, 100%. That's how you become rude to join. In fact, Hilchas Geru, right? That the person come to come. If a Jew, God forbid, would come to the church and say, "I want to convert to God forbid, Christianity," no questions asked. Roll the red carpet, sprinkle some water, whatever they do to get this. You don't say, "Well, think about it some more. Maybe you might change your mind." It's not the same thing you're used to and all that. No questions asked. They bring the person in, Islam, the same thing. You want to join? All you have to do is, this is a video. So. They accept you. They accept you. They accept you, right? Judaism says, think about it some more. Maybe, you might change your mind, right? And the guy comes back a second and I thought about some more. And I didn't change my mind. And they tell the person, think about it. Like, why would you want to become part of a nation that has been hated by everybody, has been murdered by just about everybody, has been treated like dirt all through history? Why become part of this nation? And if the person comes back and says, "It's dafka why I want to become part of this nation," you take immediately at that point in time. Right? So why don't you just put an ad in the newspaper? Judaism, looking for converts, masochists wanted. People who enjoy pain, suffering. That's who we're looking for over here.
He's a dentist, he'll tell you.
Yeah. I'm going to tell you my dentist joke, but I'll hold on. In fact, that's what's going on in the story over here. It's a phenomenal story, and it's a story that unfortunately people they don't focus on one of the main points of the entire story because it seems to be very insignificant or very secondary. But it's the main point of the story. That's the story of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. right? This whole story, the Gemara starts on Nun Hey Amid Base and goes through Nun Vav Aleph, Dal Base, and finally finishes on Nun Zayin Amid Aleph, where it says, "Come and see how much a Kosh Baruch Hu doesn't like embarrassing people because of the bush that Bar Kamsa suffered. That the Kosh Baruch Hu allowed him or helped him to destroy the Beis Hamikdash, the Heichal, the whole thing." So very long Gemara, right? If you recall the Gemara, what was one of the high points of that Gemara? The Gemara has a lot of parts to it. It's very unusual, different things going on over here. There's a hashgacha pratis, that really require a lot of questioning and answering. But there's one part of the entire story that is tremendous. It's so powerful. It's a chaval that most people don't focus on. What part am I talking about? I don't know. Do you remember the whole story?
The thing where they could have lied a little bit.
That's one very interesting part of the entire story. What's going on over there? But that's not the main part over here.
He said he would pay for the whole meal if you just had
That's more like to show you how stubborn people can be, but it's not it. Give up?
Yeah, Rob.
Give us a hint.
Give us a hint.
Reb Meir.
Bob will get it if you give us a big enough hint. We're here long enough.
Reb Meir.
Huh?
That's your hint.
What's that?
Reb Meir.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's a big hint.
Reb Meir. It's a huge hint. Do you remember the story? Because what happens basically after this whole thing takes place, and Zachariah, because of Anivus, that they send back, that Bar comes to go back home, back to the Romans with his tale and accuse the Jewish people and brings the Roman army out on the Jewish people. In the midst of this story is this person named Neron, not Nero, but Neron. He was, I guess, a general of some sort. He was leading the troops in the battle against the Jewish people to take Yerushalayim. And the Gemara says, first he walks up to first he shoots an arrow east, north, south, west, and all the arrows fall towards Yerushalayim. Interesting way of determining things, right? But all the arrows fall towards Yerushalayim, so he gets nervous. Now, already you should be asking questions because most Romans who would see this happen would say, "This is fantastic. This is clearly a sign from the Roman gods. I will be successful in battle today." It's a sign from the Roman gods. I mean, if they believed in them, they brought sacrifices. So certainly this might be a sign from from their sources of belief that they're going to be successful. Charge, right? Straightforward. Not Neron. He gets nervous. He gets cold feet. So he walks up to a cheder child, a child with cheder. He says to him, "Tell me the pasuk that you've been learning." I forget how Rashi explains it. This child was confused about he wasn't able to learn so well. But this pasuk he said clearly, which was a simon that it was like Min Shemayim. And he gives it this pasuk, and the pasuk more or less says that Hashem is taking his anger against Esav, and through the Jewish people, something like that effect, if I recall correctly. And Neron, at that point in time, doesn't say, "Oh, good, I'm going to be successful in victory now. This is clearly a sign. First the arrows, now this pasuk. It's really going in my favor. I'm going to be successful," and they are. They're going to be. Vespasian comes later on. Titus, they're going to destroy Yerushalayim. They're going to destroy the Beis Hamikdash. They're going to take the Jewish people captive. Everything he saw was true. What does Neron do at that point in time? He turns to Hashem, and this is bizarre. Why do we take these things in stride? Why don't we stop and camp out on this Gemara right here and say, what is going on over here? When does this ever happen? This is a Roman general. This is some Roman like Unclus who was a nephew, and this is like somebody who's high up in the Roman army, Mistama, who is completely devoted to his principles. But he feels already this is warning. He says to Kosh Baruch Hu, "You mean to wipe your hands, right? To spill blood and wipe your hands on me?" That's what he says. I'm not going to be the fall guy. He says at this point in time, he's deserting. I mean, he's going against his, the orders of this Roman army. I'm not going to be the one through whom you're going to destroy the Beis Hamikdash and then blame me for having done it. That's a very bold thing to say, to believe and to say and to follow up on that. Now, what are you going to do? There's two possibilities. Let's say, right, Lu Yitzur, that he actually says this thing, and he actually decides he's not going to lead the attack like he was supposed to, like he was commissioned to do, and if he doesn't do, it's like mutiny, basically, therefore he's going to be either imprisoned, so what do you call it, court-martialed. So what do? You run away. Executed. You run away. You run away to some faraway island. You get as far away from the action as you possibly can. You don't want to face God, but you can't face the Romans either. Can't go back home again. What does this person do?
Convert.
He converts.
Yeah.
He becomes a Jew. He's already confirmed. Why is he not leading the attack? Because he knows it's going to be successful against the Jewish people to destroy them, or at least the base of Mikdash, and do severe harm against the Jewish people. And you join them? That's already bizarre, very bizarre. It's off the charts, off the radar in terms of bizarreness over here. And the Gemara comes back with a nice little conclusion that sums the entire thing up. It's Gavaldic. It's like so incredibly powerful a point. He says, and from him came Rabbi Meir. And the Gemara says Rabbi Meir that if Rabbi Meir wasn't so smart, if he wasn't so way beyond all of us in terms of his knowledge that we can't even fathom his thinking, that the halach would always be like him. We can't paskin like it because we can't decide if he's right or wrong based upon the fact we can't understand what he's saying. But there's no question he's leagues and leagues ahead of us. So what did this person do to be zoiche to become the ancestor of Rabbi Meir in this whole thing? So the answer is hashgacha pratis. He was able to recognize the hand of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. You know why he joined the Jewish people? The same reason why this executioner, Rabbi Pinchas, why he joined the Jewish people, because he was witnessing a phenomenal nace, and he had two options. He could either write the miracle off and say it's really just the Roman gods, and therefore go along with the party line, the whole thing, and pay down the road, the consequence, like Titus did later on, and that's what Titus exactly the same thing. He ignored hashgacha pratis the whole way through. He says, their God can fight only on water but not on land. He's talking to God. He's taking on God. He's acknowledging the reality of the Jewish God. And yet he totally, like Purim, ignores it. He's talking to God. He's talking to Moshe. He's talking to God through Moshe. He's witnessing. He says, God's a tzaddik, I'm not. And at the end of the day, he still goes against Kodesh Baruch Hu the whole way. It's an incredible, cognitive dissonance. But not this person. This person says, wow, this is real hashgacha pratis. If there's real hashgacha pratis, God really runs the world. If God really runs the world, when he promises the Jewish people Olam Haba, he must mean it. They may suffer now in the meantime and go through all what they're going to go through, but the whole reason why they're going through it, as opposed to the Romans who can do all kinds of things all they want all over the world and never have to pay too much in this world till later on, but the reason why the Jewish people keep being taken to task for all the things they do go wrong is to cleanse them and purify them for the world to come. It means the world to come is real. That's what this executioner says by Chanan Mitzrayim. He says that either these guys are crazy, no, Abba, what do to see you suffer like this? But don't worry, my daughter, the same way because Baruch will take revenge on behalf of the Sefer Torah, he'll take revenge on behalf of me, right? Rabbi, what do you see? I see Osius, flying to Shemayim, but the parchment burns, the whole story over there, Gans mice over there, right? And the executioner is going, these guys are having a discussion like in the base measure someplace else, and he's burned to death. Rabbi, open your mouth, the fire can consume you. No, the God who gave me my soul will take away my soul. I'm not going to die a second earlier than I'm supposed to. Everybody else is like, we crying for mercy and desperation and screaming out and, cursing God. And this guy is like having a conversation like he's sitting having a cup of coffee someplace in the base medrash. Either he's crazy, right, which doesn't seem to be the case because we're all going along with it, or he knows something I don't know. This world to come thing must be so real. And if there's a world to come, and I'm his executioner, and I'm a Roman, I ain't going there. And I want to go there. So immediately, on a dime, turns around and says, this is hashgacha pratis, Hashem runs the world, I want to be part of the Jewish people, I can't go back home and face the Romans again, because I'm going to go against their policies and all that. Becomes a convert, jumps in the fire, and he's going to the world to come to.
And he gets Olam Haba.
Gets Olam Haba. With Chanan Mitzrayim, they both get Much L'chayil of me. Because that's what it all comes down to, this idea. And that's why...
Isn't that where Rabbi Meir cries? And he says some people get Olam Haba.
Rebbe, that's Rebbe Yehuda. Okay. Right, he cries because, and that's really, we've spoken about these three stories before. They're very, very powerful stories.
What was his name? What was his name?
Niran. Nun Yud Reish Vav Nun.
So in other words, he was the conceptual form of Rabbi Meir. In other words, he fathomed the depth.
I guess to some degree, not exactly like the Rameir, but it's certainly the shorish. There's a root.
Rabbi Meir got into the depths of Torah. He didn't have any
Exactly,
Torah.
yeah.
He didn't have Torah. What he had was.
But he had a very special neshama because somehow to be able to sense this and to see this and then to convert on top of all that, because that's what it means to be Klal Yisrael. That's what makes a Jew who he is, right? Now, so that distinguishes from the rest of the world to a large degree. And the moment that we do not live with Hashgacha Pratis on such a level, we undo what it means to become part of Klal Yisrael. So that's why the brothers, when Yaakov questioned them, because they lost the Nevuah, he didn't say, did you clean up the house? Did you help him? But he asked, is the Yichud, are you real? Because, why? Because for the Shekhinah to be sure, the Shekhinah left him. The Shekhinah left him. That's what it says. Not the Nevuah, the Shekhinah left him temporarily. That's why he got nervous. Not just the Nevuah left him, but the Shekhinah left him. The Shekhinah leaving anything means there's a lack of Achdus in Klal Yisrael. Because of Shekhinah to be dwelling on anybody, but there has to be Yichud in the person himself and of Klal Yisrael. So that's why he said, it's a Yichud issue over here. A Yichud Hashem. So they came back and they said, what? The Shema. Because the Shema is about Hashem Elokim, Hashem Echad. What's the Yichud of the Shema? Hashem Elokim. Right? I took him Mitzrayim to show you should know in your hearts Hashem Hu Elokim. Kodesh Baruch Hu, the same God of Yisrael Yisrael, is the same God of Baruch Shem Kavod Machzor Ve'ed. So how does the Mishkan do? The Mishkan really, in a sense, represents the Yichud. So what happens is that by Shechem, right, you have the Chof between the Shin and the Mem, right, as a division, because that's Amalek. Just like that. That's why Shechem is a Makkah Muchal Poinot. The place itself is the place. But the concept of Shechem is anything by definition, any place, whether physically, spiritually, conceptually, which by definition results in a division, in the Yichud of Yud Kei Vav Kei, that's a Shechem mentality. That's a Shechem reality in the end. So you look at the Mishkan, right? The word Mishkan itself is written Mem Shin, Men Shim Chuf Nun, right? The Shin and Mem, it's reversed, but the Shin and Mem are now together. The Chuf is drawn out after, right? And what follows is the Nun, right? So the Shin and the Mem are joined together again, like they're supposed to be like a Shem, the Shem itself. The Chuf is no longer separating the Shem and the Mem, so there's a Yichud of a Shem in the Mishkan itself, and the Nun is extra. We'll see what the Nun represents, but we know for when
50 levels
of Kedusha, Kedusha Bin, and that's what the priest says.
Bina.
This exactly, and that's why, and that's exactly what Haman came to stop, because as the priest points out, Haman built his eights, which you'll see is tied the eights of Tavara, Nun Amos High. Nun Amos High. Why? Because it wasn't simply about me. He wanted everyone to see Mordechai being hung. You don't need, first of all, 50 is pretty high. I don't think you need binoculars to see who's up there, right? But
50,
why?
50 meters?
50 amas. 50 amas would be, it's like an amma is one.
75 feet.
Yeah.
No, an amma?
One
yeah,
amma.
No, it's 75 feet.
Yeah,
Right.
it's a machloek between 1.5 to 2 feet. So the ultimate 50 would be 100 feet. 50, between 75 and 100 feet. Yeah, very high, very high. That's like 7 stories up. 7 stories up. Yeah. That's you can't even see that high.
They don't even raise the American flag that high.
Yeah, because you can't even. It's not. It's just too high up there. So as the priest explains, because Haman sensed. He sensed there was going to be spashtus of Nun Shari Bina into the world at that point in time. That Mordechai was the vehicle to bring it about, and therefore he tried to stop that by building the eight to hang him 50 amas high. It wasn't so much a physical reality as much as a conceptual point, and that's what the Gemara says. The Gemara says that Haman he sensed. I mean, Amalek, whether he actually consciously sensed it or unconsciously sensed it, but according to the priest, he knew there was going to be an emanation of Torah of the Nun Shari Bina, which is the vehicle that really is a Torah Shebal Peh, into the world at that point in time, Purim time, and therefore he tried to counteract it by building on the side of Terumah the eights 50 amas high. Zu Lumuzu.
Haman knew this.
Either that's what the priest says that he knew it, but
it's very conceivable because Amalek is a very spiritual.
100%. Yeah,
So
no, it's very possible.
And it's always there to whenever they sense this kedusha, whenever they are so sensitive to kedusha that they're so drawn to it, they'll do everything possible to interfere.
Not to mention the fact that Haman is actually Hey Nun. They are the 50 Jewish people at Nun Shari Bina, so he's the counterpoint to that. And also it's Haman, right? The man that fell back in Parashat Beshalach, which immediately is followed by the story of Amalek attacking the Jewish people. And why is that the case? Because Hashem says, for how long will you people stop not believing me? Right to the man. So there's a whole episode there by the man. By the man it says that...
Going out past the Terumah, going out...
Well, on Shabbos, that's a very connected the man. So they're the only two that do that. But Moshe Rabbeinu is held responsible. So Rashi says, why is Moshe held responsible? Because Moshe did not teach them the halacha about collecting the double portion of man in advance. When Hashem tells Moshe Rabbeinu about the man falling Erev Shabbos, it says, "V'haya b'yom hashishi." It will be in the 6th day. It'll be, lechem mishnah, like bake what you'll bake, cook what you'll cook, because it's not going to fall tomorrow. But later on, when they actually go and collect it on Erev Shabbos, it says "V'yihi b'yom hashishi," and it was on the 6th day that they went to collect it, and lo and behold, there were 2 omers of man that didn't rot like it's supposed to. They came to the Siyam. The Siyam said, "Oh, look at this! What a fantastic miracle! We don't know what's going on over here." Moshe just said nothing about this. Let's go ask Moshe Rabbeinu. Moshe Rabbeinu, what's going on over here? Oh, that's what Hashem said to tell you, right? An Erev Shabbos, double portion of man. So Rashi says, for that reason, he's held responsible. It's amazing that Moshe, this one particular point, So the Gemara says in Megillah, of all places, right? The lashon v'haya is lashon simcha. When a pasuk begins v'haya, it's always alluding to something very positive about the transpire. It's lashon of joy. Vayhi could be either lashon of joy or lashon of sar. But may is definitely lashon of sar, right? V'hi itself can be a negative thing. So the first time that Hashem speaks to Moshe Rabbeinu about the man, he says v'haya. It's going to be a joyous moment for you on day 6. You'll collect the double portion of man. You'll see it won't rot like it does every other day. But they're going to collect it. It says v'yihi b'yom hashishi. So then what's the problem? Because Moshe didn't tell him about the miracle that was going to happen over here. What's a greater source of simcha when you know about a good thing coming up, or you're surprised to find a good thing, right? Today you have a double portion. Let's go find out. Well, just like he said, right? Or you're expecting a single portion and you collect 2 portions. The second one's not rotting. So it's like, wow, it's amazing. Look, it's a miracle. Now they come right to the Nisim. What's going on? It's like a bigger nace. So the Sefer says Zevti Tarev is based upon I think Targum Unison. It's the Diuk in the Lashon, but it says there that the reason why it was a lesser miracle when they actually collected it versus what Moshe had told them first is because what Moshe was going to tell them was not that you should collect 2 omers of man. That's not what Hashem said. Hashem said you'll have lechem mishnah. He doesn't say collect 2 omers of man. He says you'll have a double portion. So he said that's not. The goal wasn't to, because what were they doing in the first place? Collecting 2 omers of man, right? They would. You're only supposed to have 1 omer. See, I get a bit more, but less, whatever. But everyone collecting 2 omers to find out the second one's not rotting. Okay, so maybe they didn't collect 2 omers of man, but the surplus, whatever they had, didn't rot. Fine, that's also true. But what's supposed to happen instead was Moshe was supposed to tell the Jewish people, pick up 1 omer of man like you always do. But as you're picking it up, say the words Lechaved Shabbos Kodesh, and the 1 omer of man will become 2 omers of man right there in your container. What did they do instead? They picked up 2 omers of man, and the second one didn't rot. They picked up 2 physically, and the second one didn't rot. Had they been told in advance by Moshe Rabbeinu, it would have been pick up 1 omer of man, and the 1 becomes 2. What's a bigger miracle? Obviously, 1 becomes 2. What do we call it if you pick up 2 and 1 should have rotted and didn't rot? What do you call that in scientific terms?
Chance, Rob.
No. What do you call it in scientific terms?
When?
When something that shouldn't be is in the end.
Extension.
No. A phenomenon. That's called a phenomenon.
Yeah.
If something happens, I think, only once in 20 times or less, it's called a phenomenon. But once in 20 already is an unusual thing. And you can get government money for studying to this thing, basically, because that's considered to be unusual. But it's a phenomenon. You can't argue with the fact you picked up 2 omers of man, and 1 always rots, and 1 didn't rot today. So it's a phenomenon. It's not necessarily a miracle. You can't argue with the fact that you picked up 2, and you can't argue with the fact that 1 didn't rot. Maybe there's a scientific reason for that. Maybe it has to do with the weather. Maybe it has to do with your appetite. Maybe it has to do with your thinking. Who knows? But there's a physical reality involved. But what do you call it when you pick up one omer of man and it becomes two? Either magic or miracle in the end. So that's the change of the lashon. Bahaya was you pick up one, it becomes two. The joy will be unbelievable. But the vihi was they picked up two and it become one in the end. It's a lesser miracle. And Amalek attacks because of that. Amalek attacks because of that. Because had they picked up the one and it became two, they would never have uttered the words Hayesh Hashem b'kirbeinu im ayin, which Rashi says is the reason why Amalek attacks. Because how could you ask a question like that? You just found out that all you have to do is say L'chava Shabbos Kodesh, and one omer becomes two omers of man, right? It means that basically the very fact that I can't see a solution to a problem right now doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. The very fact that I can't physically change the reality, I got $20, but I need $40 right now. And I got nowhere to take it from, physically speaking. I just found out if I say, L'chava Shabbos Kodesh, one of them becomes two buns, maybe I done to Kosh Baruch Hu, right, and say, Hashem, I need help, the $20 will show up somehow, some way, in ways I'd never even considered before in the past. So I'm going to ask, is a Kodesh Baruch Hu amongst us or not? Hashem versus I am. I'm going to ask that question. Amalek only comes because we doubt the extent of Hashem's involvement in everyday life. In fact, Rashi says exactly that. Now you can appreciate Rashi. It's always beautiful to go, b'derech sod, and then get back to pshat and see the pshat in a whole different angle, different level. Rashi says, "Lama hadavar domeh." This whole episode with Amalek, what's it like? Like a father who's carrying his son on his shoulders, right? And he said, the son says to the father, "Abba, pick up that for me," and he picks it up. "Abba, pick up that for me," and he picks it up. "Abba, pick it down the whole," right? He gets so used to being on his father's shoulders. Finally, when he passed, a passerby, he says, "Excuse me, mister, have you seen my father anywhere?" "What? Your father's underneath between your legs. You're sitting on his shoulders right now." What are you talking about? The father says, "What? Up until now, I've been doing everything for you and making it all possible. I got you your job, I got your parnasa, I got you your family, I got your wife, I got your kids. The whole thing comes from me. I've been carrying you for so long now, and now you're beginning to doubt where I am? Go back then on the earth where Amalek exists, where the dog exists, and he'll bite you, and you'll realize who's been running the shop until now, why you've been so safe." I mean, take a look at the Jewish people. We spoke about this before in the past several times. It's such an important point. Halachahi. Esav Sona es Yaakov. The civility the Jewish people have enjoyed historically when we've had it. We didn't always have it, right? But today we've had it. We've had the last 60, 70 years. We've had it, periods during history where Alexander meets Shimon Tzaddik, and there's, we get along with them, and there's civility, and there's peace for a period of time, and even with the Romans sometimes, and with the Babylonians. Every time we've enjoyed civility, it's not because the Gentile nations have said, you know something, these Jews aren't so bad after all. And they've been treated so roughly up until now. Let's be nice. Not like that at all. It's the Shekhinah. It's the Kodesh Baruch Hu carrying the Jewish people on his shoulders, protecting us, bending the arm of love to make sure that every morning he smiles the same way as he has the day before. So Yaakov can say, he likes me. But the moment that Lavan stops smiling, that's the norm. He doesn't smile the same way as he did yesterday, that's the norm. The brothers are speaking blood libels. Yaakov got rich off our father over here, even though we only exist because of his bracha in the end, right? That's the norm in the world, in history, until Mashiach comes. And the only reason why it hasn't happened all the time is because Baruch Hu has made sure we've had periods of protection. As the Gemara points out, points out, Antoninas, he was a righteous Gentile, but he could have lived another period of history. He could have come 100 years before Rebbe, or 100 years after Rebbe. He came specifically at Rebbe's time, so Rebbe could write the Mishnah down, record the Mishnah. There's a period of peace. The Shekhinah does that. And to the failure, as Rashi points, the failure to recognize and realize we're being carried the entire time. That everything is mir shemayim. Look at Yosef says to his brothers. It's incredible. It changes the whole vantage point of the story. The brothers are all worried now because Yosef has been found. He's alive. He's well. He's now he's viceroy of Egypt. He's in a position of revenge, and he can say to his brothers, "Oh, now's my chance. You guys are finished, right? You guys are history now, right?" He doesn't say that. He's worried about their worry. He gets back and says, don't worry, guys. Don't feel so bad about the situation. Really, I would say, feel bad. You shouldn't have been there. You're the wrong guys to have done it, right? But, he don't know. It's all Min Shemayim. Hashem worked through you to put me down here to save the Jewish people. It was all one big hatzagah. One big play. Krish Baruch is the author, is the playmaster. Haman's on one hand, this hand. Mordechai on the other hand. Krish Baruch was the entire show, and that's what Mordechai tells Esther as well. See, the Jewish people, they're shaking in their boots. Haman is making them shake in their boots because they think that Haman has power he doesn't have. Only Mordechai sees that. So Mordechai goes out of his way. Haman's walking by, he goes out of his way to stand in the face of Haman, and Haman, it's like, you gotta ask the question. Moshe's going back and forth. Paro put wild animals in his courtyard, so Moshe and Aaron couldn't get across like a moat. So they would die along the way, and they're going in, they're going out, they're going in, they're going out, they're going in, they're going out. Right? Nothing touches them. Paro is the mightiest man. Can you imagine someone going to Hitler Mach and say, let my Jews go? The guy's dead. 2 seconds. Right? Throw him in jail. Torture the guy. You're making a request from me? If you could even see him in the first place? And Moshe goes in with Aaron. Everybody else slipped away. They're all worried. They're all afraid. There were all these people who went with him, and one by one they began to slip. He's getting closer, getting closer. I'm not going in, right? Moshe goes in, Moshe goes out. Moshe goes in, Moshe goes out. Mordechai, he goes in, he goes out. Says by the king. Does that bother you, this story? Always, every year bothers me, the story that Mordechai is able to just have this freedom and right in the face of Haman, and Haman's powerless. And it drives him nuts. And he says to Zeresh, this guy's driving me nuts. Nothing's worth it. I can't enjoy a single thing I'm accomplishing over here in this palace. I got all this power and wealth and covered. But this guy, this one Jew, there's one Jew in my face, and I can't do anything about him. Does Achashverosh, would he know he's missing? If he killed him, this Jew, Achashverosh is worried about this person? No, once Akash Baruch Hu arranged it, that the books, the history, the Quran, no. So then it gets elevated, and Haman's watching the entire thing. He can't believe it. It's so mugzam. And Zeresh is smart enough to recognize what's going on, and she tells him, you're not going to succeed if he's from, how do our enemies know these things? She's stole our line. Always reminds me of the story, years ago when I was first becoming, frumer, and I get a lot of kiru involved, and I go back to visit relatives or friends or people, talking to people, and you're in yeshiva, and you're always saying Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem, Baruch Hashem. It's like Chas v'shalom, you shouldn't say Baruch Hashem after something. Bleeding, Baruch Hashem, and you go back to Chutz La'aretz, go back to North America, go back to visit family, and someone says to you, how you doing? And they're like, they're not religious at all, and they feel that you've gone off the deep end already. So you're so worried about how to answer that question. So you say to yourself, you think it to yourself, Hashem forgive me, right? And there's one time, right? You just thank God. So someone asked me, said, how you doing? And I thought to myself, this guy, I don't, fine. And I said, how you doing? He goes, oh, good, thank God. And I went, he stole my line. That's my line. That's what I'm supposed to say. This person went ahead why didn't I say it? He said it. He got the Kedesh Hashem. He stole that's the Zeresh. She's stealing our line. She's saying what the Jewish people are supposed to be saying. Mordechai comes to Esther and says to Esther, right? He says, what do you do? Go in. Go. You can't go in. You just don't pop in an Achashverosh. God forbid, it can kill you in the spot. Mordechai says, what are you talking about? This is not about Achashverosh. It's not about Haman over here. It's about Akash Baruch Hu bringing the Gula. He's bringing the Gula. For all you know, the whole reason why you're in. Look at your story. You're a Jewess. A female Jew who was chosen amongst all these people. And the Gemara goes even further because she wasn't a basula anymore. And normally the king only chose basulas, right? And she was a woman, and he chose her anyhow. And amongst all these, Gentile women, because there's a chutz chesed that surrounds her, because Baruch's like pushing her into the forefront, into the spotlight, and she becomes the queen over Persia, this mighty, massive empire in the world, amongst how many, millions of women he can choose from, and she's maneuvered into this position, and she has a question about Hashgacha Pratis, what she's doing there in the first place. Hashem arranges the whole thing. And Mordechai says, why do you look at what Hashem has been doing? We're on the fast track to Gul over here. And if you don't do it, it's going to happen anyhow. And that's the whole struggle. And the Gemara says,
What did Zerah say? What was her line?
she said, if he comes from, from,
Seed of Israel.
of Yehuda, I think, from the seed of Yehuda, I think is specifically, right? Then,
He was from Binyamin.
well, it's a machlokes of the Gemara, whether Yehuda, Benjamin, it's got both basically. But whatever, if you, because she knew he was a Jew, that much she knew, right? I think it came from the seed of Yehuda. Then you'll have no shlita against him. He's gonna win. He's gonna overpower
She
you.
said that?
Yeah, she said that. It's Gemara in Megillah.
Yehudim she uses. That's right.
He was a Yehudim or Yehuda?
No, Yehudim.
Yehudim? Okay.
He's saying that about Mordechai?
About Mordechai.
Well, she knew he was a Jew.
Yeah, I mean, I look at the Gemara again, but
Mordechai Ha-Yehudi.
yeah.
Is that why it says Hi Yehudi?
Yeah,
With the
because-
hay?
Yeah, there's a whole discussion about where he came from because of a shul, from both sides. I don't look at the Gemara, but the point is anyhow is that she knew there was something special about him, and that was the source of the shlita that he had. So the bottom line is, and this is a 2-part series, by the way, to finish next week, because then he has Parashat Salve. But the point is that you see the whole struggle. The Gemara says that by Har Sinai, Kodesh Baruch Hu held the mountain Har Kegigis, right, like a mountain over their head, like a barrel over the heads of the Jewish people. So the Gemara says that well, I don't understand. They said Nasa V'Nishma. So there's different pshatim as to what took place. Tosfos says that they how's it go? That what does the Tosfos say? I forget. Tosfos, the Gemara itself says that they were they were willing to Makabel Torsh B'Sav. The Gemara itself says that they were Makabel Torsh B'Sav B'Ahava, but they were not Makabel Torsh B'Peh B'Ahava, only B'Yira. So the Gemara says that was rectified at the time of Achashverosh. The Maharal says that they were Makabel both parts of Torah because Baruch Hu wanted to make the point that there was no, right? And as like, had you not said yes, that would have been the end of you people. You would not have gone weiter from this point on because there was really no. The world stands on Torah, and therefore it cannot rely upon the whims of a nation. I asked you, do you want to accept it, to give you the opportunity to say yes, to get rewarded as if there was a no. But there really was no. But the Gemara's point is the one that's most central to the discussion, and that is by Purim time, that's when the Jewish people were following Makabel Torah Me'ahava. This whole episode. What? Torah Shbal Peh Me'ahava, right? What is the connection, right? Why? What happened at Purim? What happened with Mordechai? What happened with this whole story of Haman? What took place? What was it specifically that made them change their mind about Torah Shbal Peh? But up until now, they were doing it because it was Meira. They had to as part of the halacha, right? Because we'll say that Torah Shbal Peh is the whole thread through history in the end. But there's something specifically that the miracle itself, that the nace of Purim showed them they cannot live without Torah Shebal Peh. That it was really the source of their whole salvation. That if they didn't understand what it was about and why it was so important, then somehow they would never survive history. They came to realize something very, very specific, very, very important in the miracle through Mordechai, through the entire story of Esther and how the whole thing unfolds, and the destruction of Haman in the end, right? And how the role of Amalek, which basically comes specifically against Torah Shebal Peh, that somehow in this entire episode they were able to fix it, rectify that, and the Kabbalah Torah can be shlemus, both Torah and Torah Shebal Peh, out of love, as opposed to only fear itself, and somehow the Mishkan embodied all of that. And somehow that was the tikkun for Shechem. And somehow it was tied to the Nun, because we see that with the addition of the Nun, the Shechem transforms Shechem into Mishkan. And Mishkan is the exact opposite. The Mishkan represents the Yichud of Klal Yisrael, primarily the Yichud of Kodesh Baruch Hu in this world, and therefore you have the complete unity, therefore the Shekhinah cannot be Shara, because that's the bottom line. The whole point of the Shekhinah being Shara and Klal Yisrael in the world itself is to bring about the Yachdus. The Yachdus makes it possible, the Hashrosh Shekhinah, but also the Hashrosh Shekhinah makes possible the Yachdus. They both feed each other. And Purim represents that solution. Stay tuned for part 2 of this Hashem.